This is not a drill. This is not a drill. General quarters. General quarters. All hands man your battle station.
I was shackled and put in prison. Being an American citizen didn't mean a thing. The year, 1941. The United States was carefully monitoring several possible threats against the land due to its neutrality in the issue of the Tri-Party Act, where Germany, Japan, and Italy joined forces. It was the calm before the storm. Everything changed dramatically on the morning of December 7, 1941, after the surprising and unfortunate Japanese attack to Pearl Harbor, which pushed the United States to war. Prior to this time, a young Japanese descendant named Fred Korematsu, born in Oakland, California, was working as a welder in a shipyard after being rejected by the U.S. Navy because of unfitness compared to white people in 1940. After the Pearl Harbor attack, he was asked to resign due to his Japanese descent and was denied any type of financial compensation. To make matters worse, President Roosevelt signed in 1942 Executive Order 9066, authorizing the exclusion of any Japanese descendants and their transport to internment camps.
Living in that zone were more than 100,000 persons of Japanese ancestry, 2/3 of them American citizens, 1/3 aliens. We knew that some among them were potentially dangerous, but no one knew what would happen among this concentrated population if Japanese forces should try to invade our shores. Military authorities therefore determined that all of them, citizens and aliens alike, would have to move.
I lost everything when they put us in prison. I was a man without a country. Korematsu angrily and firmly refused to comply to this order and went into hiding in the Oakland area. However, on May 30th, 1942, while walking with his girlfriend, he was arrested for refusing to go to the camp. He was taken to Tan Foreign Relocation Center in San Bruno, south of San Francisco. He was tried and convicted in federal court for having violated Military Order 503 on September 8, 1942, and received a sentence of 5 years probation. Him and his family were moved to the Topaz internment camp in Utah. Once there, he was placed in a horse stall with a single light bulb. Shortly after his arrest, Ernest Bezig, director of the American Civil Liberties Union, asked him if he was willing to let him use his case to test a technicality found in the Japanese-American internment camps. Korematsu gladly accepted. His lawyer appealed his conviction on March 27, 1943, to the U.S. Court of Appeals, and the oral arguments started on October 11, 1944. Unfortunately, the laws fell silent once again, when a 6-3 ruling was issued on December 18th, upholding Korematsu's conviction on the grounds of justification during circumstances of emergency and peril.
The justification about the president having emergency powers in times of war wasn't sufficient to allow that. Not to mention, we were also fighting Germans and Italians, and they never once, they weren't interning Germans and Italians. Now, that's not to say that a lot of communities in World War I and World War II didn't retaliate against German Americans, but not nearly to the same institutionalized extent that they did in the Japanese internment. And the fact that the majority of the court in Korematsu allowed this to happen on flimsy justification is pretty shameful. And the dissenters on the opinion, their views have been vindicated later on.
All of them turned their backs on me at that time because they thought I was a troublemaker. Korematsu was disappointed to see how the American law system continued to violate his citizenship rights, discriminating him and his family on the grounds of their ethnicity. After being released from the Utah camp, he stayed in Salt Lake City, where he continued his crusade against racism. In May 1945, his parents were released and they went back to the flower shop they used to own, only to sadly find out that it was no longer there because it had been neglected by the tenants. Later on, in 1946, Korematsu moved to Detroit, Michigan, where he married and had 2 children. During this time, he was not able to earn enough money since all the jobs he could do were low-paying entry-level due due to his criminal conviction. During the next 30 years, he tried to bury the past, perhaps because the memories were too painful. However, the conflict was starting to have a more positive resolution. In 1976, President Gerald Ford signed a proclamation formally terminating Executive Order 9066 while apologizing for the Japanese internment camps.
So it was wrong both morally and for the, foundation of our country, but also it was counterproductive ultimately to the war effort because it was gave our enemies a propaganda tool showing that where we were claiming we were morally superior to our enemies, they were using this as evidence that we weren't.
One person can make a difference, even if it takes 40 years. Korematsu started to feel hopeful. In 1981, a researcher named Peter Irons, who was doing a book on wartime internment camps, discovered that the government lied to the High Court. One example was a memo Irons found from a Justice Department lawyer to U.S. Solicitor General Charles Fay, accusing him of lying to the Supreme Court during the decision for the internment order. One of the grounds for this decision was a claim that some Japanese were engaging in extensive radio signaling and in-shore-to-ship signaling to Japanese ships, which was an evidence of treason. However, the Justice Department memo stated that there was no evidence of treason, and the signaling was nothing more than youngsters going to outdoor toilets at night with flashlights. Irons contacted Korematsu and asked him if he would be willing to go to court once again with this new evidence, but this time to question whether the internment was constitutional or not. Korematsu accepted. It was peacetime, and the laws were going to be tested to see if they would fail him again or would have a fair resolution to this conflict. If anyone should do any pardoning, I should be the one pardoning the government for what they did to the Japanese American people. The hearing was set for November 10, 1983. Prior to the hearing, the presiding judge, Meryl Hall Patel, met in private with Korematsu to try to convince him and his lawyers of evading the issue and perhaps change it for a formal pardon. However, Korematsu's convictions for justice were very strong, and he did not want forgiveness for refusing to do something that he believed was unlawful. The hearing went on as scheduled, and at the end of it, in an unusual move for a judge, Patel invited Korematsu to speak, and after he finished, she ruled from the bench, vacating the conviction.
The judge, she said that government should think twice before they do anything like this again. I just couldn't believe that this happened, but I won, and so did everybody else that was there. There were a lot of them with, tears in their eyes because they were in turn also. It was a great victory for all Americans and all Asians in this country, that this will never happen again.
As long as my record stands in federal court, any American citizen can be held in prison or concentration camps without a trial or hearing. In 1988, President Reagan declared the internment camp a grave injustice and signed a legislation authorizing reparation of $20,000 for all the surviving internees, including Korematsu. In 1998, President Clinton awarded Korematsu a Presidential Medal of Freedom for his tenacity in the fight against prejudice, which continued from 2001 until his death on March 30, 2005. His case opened the doors of controversy. Resolution to conflicts that have an underground ethnical involvement can be a gray area in the law. Korematsu warned about how fear can become the worst enemy of a government. Although his case set a constitutional precedent, the Supreme Court ruling is discarded and disdained, but not disarmed. In wartime, the conflict with another ethnic group may arise again. Hopefully, the laws will not remain silent, but will help justice to prevail in this great nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.